Dear President Joe Biden, I hope that you are well, and I hope that you feel a lot better now after the unfortunate incident at the U.S. Air Force Academy graduation event where you tripped and fell. Mr. President, I make this video with a very heavy heart. Sometime in December of 2022, the second ever U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit held, and it was widely adjudged to have been very successful. About 49 African heads of state attended, and the U.S. made a lot of commitment. U.S. pledged a lot of financial support, especially for the African Union Vision 2063 and the African Digital Transformation Program and the rest of them. More than $55 billion promised. America is basically just showing that they want to step forward and be more involved and commit more to the economic growth of Africa. And we know why. It is because a lot of African countries are now navigating away from the West and then navigating towards Russia, China, and the BRICS formation. We know that it's a no-brainer. Shortly after the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, on March the 27th, Vice President Kamala Harris visited Africa on a 3-country tour of the continent. It was her first time on the continent, and she was going to visit Ghana, Tanzania, and Zambia. Kamala Harris in the Republic of Ghana heard the Ghanaians were about to pass an anti-gay bill, and she took the time to speak to the president about that, and she began to promote gay rights in the country of Ghana. And everything that she said to the president and to the media all rang like a subtle threat to that African nation, which is why the lawmakers took exception and blew up and said all the things they said about America. When she left Ghana, she went to Tanzania and Zambia. It was the same thing. Around the period that she was making these trips across the continent of Africa, she was visiting the West, the East, and the South. Uganda had just overwhelmingly passed a bill, an anti-gay bill, that even threatened to jail for life people who are seen identifying as homosexuals or members of the LGBTQ. Even had some elements of capital punishment in the bill. The Ugandan parliament passed this. About 99-point-something% voted in favor of this bill, anti-gay bill. When this happened, the United States, Canada, and most Western nations descended on Uganda, and they began to threaten the country. They began to threaten, we're going to withdraw aid, we're going to cut ties with you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And just recently, the president of Uganda has signed that bill into law. And Mr. President, the first reaction from your administration is that you slammed officials of the government with visa bans. And then, following visa bans, you threatened to sanction them severely and to withdraw aid. And you will probably even do more to show them how angry America is. I am confused as to how the United States of America would find it okay to bully and hound and threaten an African nation that its parliament had overwhelmingly passed a bill that is against the gay lifestyle, but the same United States of America would not do the same thing to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has capital punishment attached to practicing gay or homosexual lifestyle in their country. Saudi Arabia is one of the strongest allies of the United States of America. But I have never seen anyone, U.S. official or president, who went to Saudi Arabia and threatened them on any level because of the laws they have. And just to say this, Mr. President, Uganda is just one of so many countries around the world who have similar anti-gay laws. Now, the reason I'm making the video, Mr. President, is why is it that every time Africans try to express themselves, try to exercise the freedom you told us we got at independence. The West suddenly finds it okay to bully Africans into submission. Mr. President, we see what you do in the media every day. We see you hiring a lot of black people because you want to show the world that you are a very pro-black or pro-African American president. But then in the homeland of Africans, you want to strip us of our cultural heritage. You want to destroy the moral framework that has brought us to where we are today. Mr. President, in case you don't know, or in case no one has told you, Africa is a very religious, a very traditional and cultural continent. We are a fiercely independent set of people, despite everything that has been thrown at us all the years. To see you do this in America, Mr. President, and turn around and make Africans feel like they don't have the right to govern themselves, it's marks of so much hypocrisy and double standard. January this year, 2023, it was 1 year since Canada banned conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is a process by which I, as a Christian, can approach a person who is a member of the LGBTQ community, or someone who is a homosexual, transgender, lesbian, or whatever, and try to convince them to seek help spiritually through prayers or reading the Bible, to try to convince them to seek some type of therapy from other means, things that will help them get back to who they were when they were born, to get back to the gender they were assigned at birth, to get back to the heterosexual lifestyle they once had before they transitioned. And Canada banned it and put people like me at risk of being jailed for 5 years or more if we cross the line by going to talk to them. So here is why I talk about double standard, Mr. President. Canada could do that. And many European countries have done that as well. So I am not able to even convince someone who had transitioned, not that they were born that way, they were already heterosexual beings and they transitioned. I can't offer them help or else I go to jail. But the people who are saying we don't want this lifestyle, you are sanctioning them, but nobody sanctioned Canada. No African country interfered in Canada's decision to ban conversion theory. It stays banned till this very minute. Nobody has done anything. But when we want to ban our own thing in Africa, you think it's okay for the whole West to unite and bully that African country. If that is the case, how do you then turn around and tell me that we are free? I want to understand. How do you tell me that we are free yet some other people are treated different and Africans are treated differently? We had the World Cup that just recently happened in a country that does not recognize gay marriage. And yet, FIFA allowed the World Cup to happen there. And everybody that went to the country respected it. I am not saying that the law in Uganda is not harsh, but they are not the only people who have such harsh laws against homosexuality. It was the parliament that voted, that passed the bill. If the U.S. Senate and House would pass a bill today, Mr. President, you don't have any power to do otherwise. Why do you expect the president of Uganda to go against the bill that was passed in the legislature? I don't understand this. Why are we treated like slaves, Mr. President? Is this not why many African countries today are navigating away from the West and running towards Russia and China and the BRICS? Is this not why you people are suddenly going all over the place trying to get close to African nations so that you'll be able to pull them closer to your side? But unfortunately, Africans are jumping ship. They are running away from the West. Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, Mali, all these nations were traditionally French colonies in Africa. Not anymore. They've all left. They now align themselves with Russia because they feel like the West still thinks that we're still living in the slavery era. The West believes that Africans are not due for freedom yet. They say it all the time in the media. They talk about it at big events. But in reality, what is playing out is the fact that we don't have the right to decide our own destiny. We don't have the right to say what should be and what should not be. Mr. President, it's okay for anybody on the continent of Africa, a leader of Africa, to do anything that will lead to the death of Africans, and you guys don't care. It's okay for elections to be rigged, for people to be killed in the process of elections in Nigeria, in different African countries, Mr. President, and you hear about it, you get the intelligence briefings, you see all the evidence, Mr. President, and you still give psychological and emotional support to the outcome of such corrupt elections. And all you do is slap the culprits on the wrist with visa bans. No threat. When we know that if you, collective West, will stand and put your foot down and say, listen, if you do not correct this issue in your country, we are not going to work with you in order to dissuade people who do stuff like this. No, you don't do that. When African countries or leaders do things that lead to mass death, by starvation, by poverty, you don't care, Mr. President. You don't slam anybody with sanctions. These are things that concern 90-something% of the population of Africans. But it's something that concerns a very infinitesimal population. Can you imagine that LGBTQ movement is so widespread in the West, and yet they are still in the absolute minority? Now, imagine how much of a minority they are on the continent of Africa, and for their sake, you are going to sanction an entire nation or entire nations of people. For their sake, you are going to remove aid that you give to this nation to help people who are poor. For their sake, but for the sake of 90-something%, you cannot do anything when people try to kill them or destroy them or deprive them their own rights. The rate at which Christians are being persecuted or have been persecuted and massacred in Nigeria, it is not seen anywhere else in the world. I remember when Trump signed an executive order and said this executive order is to protect people who are being persecuted for the sake of their religion. President Trump gave money, budgeted billions, and said both Nigeria and any other country where Christians or anybody, any religious group is being persecuted, this bill will ensure that they can worship whoever they want to worship freely without anybody having to come and kill them for the sake of their religion. That is your predecessor. He did not just sign, he backed it up with money and even insisted that every U.S. official being sent to these African countries must undergo serious training on how to deal with religious tolerance. Mr. President, the new generation of Africans are saying, we have had it. We've had enough of this. You need to explain to us what is really going on. This is why I decided to make a direct video to you to ask Mr. President for clarity. Who do you think we are? Do you think we deserve to be free? Or do you think we should continue to live in slavery? If what you're doing to Africans cannot be done to Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan or Iran or other places where the same laws have passed, Mr. President, I think you should have a rethink. I think you should begin to look at Africa as equal partners, because we're tired of being pushed around and being treated like we are slaves. Enough is enough, Mr. President, and I hope that you take this in good faith and that you give me the answers that I have been looking for. God bless you, Mr. President, and God bless the United States of America.